I just want to kind of spew my thoughts out on this right now. Um, the NICO saga, chapter 1 has ended. Chapter 2 begins. So NICO leaving Tennessee, and this is unbelievable to me. This is one of those like college football bombshell stories that we only get once every so often. Tennessee reset the quarterback market, bringing NICO in for $8 million a year. They overpaid him and essentially cost every other school a lot more money paying quarterbacks. And their fans thought that this kid was going to lead them to a national championship and win a couple of Heismans. That's how highly touted he was coming out of school. That's what they thought of him. Now, the NCAA attempted to go after Tennessee and over this deal with NICO. And for pay for play, Tennessee takes them to court. Tennessee wins. And that case over NICO is what has started this lawlessness of the NCAA throwing their hands up and saying, we're not going after anybody anymore when it comes to pay for play. And Tennessee, pretty much responsible for that. So responsible for resetting the market and costing everybody a ton more money with NICO, then responsible for putting us in this total state of lawlessness over the NICO deal. And now, in a poetic justice moment, what they did to college football has come back home to roost on them, as they paid NICO roughly $4.2 million to date for years 1 and 2. They got absolutely nothing out of it except for a playoff total humiliation at Neyland North. And now the money year, this is the money year. This is what it was all for. Year 3, NICO is heading out of town. And NICO put them in a situation where he was totally trying to strong arm them or he was going to leave. And again, he could have, because the contract that they have with him is not for his football services. I mean, we all know it is for his football services, but you can't write that out in the contract. Tennessee fans were laughing about that, saying you can't touch this contract. It's infallible the way they wrote it out. Like, I remember having this back and forth with them at the time. You can't say that in the contract, NICO, if you leave Tennessee after 2 years, you got to pay the money back. He never would have signed it. Or, even if you structured it like, the car wash is not going to pay you $2 million if you leave, if you move out of Knoxville, because then he wouldn't have signed the contract. Like, people are talking about like, well, you could have just made it like this or made it like that, where he has to pay money back. You can't do it. If you do it, he's not going to sign it. So he could leave at any time in the transfer portal. That part of the deal, the part of the deal where he stays, was essentially the handshake agreement that the Tennessee folks had with his family, that we are going to pay you this money. We are going to invest this money in you, even in year 1 and year 2, or year 1 specifically, where you're not doing anything. We're going to pay you $2 million. And as long as we do what we're supposed to do, you're going to stick around here and stick it through for 3 years and hopefully be the number 1 pick in the draft after 3 years. Like that's the deal. And NICO and his crew in spring camp, actually this started after the season with the first portal. So after year 2, they go and try to get Tennessee for more money. Tennessee kicks the can down the road. They're planning on paying him $2.4 million this year. Now we enter into spring camp, and NICO's people bring it back to Tennessee, and this time with threats. We're going to leave if you don't pay us more money. We don't want $2.4 million. Carson Beck, he's making $3 million. We want more money. All right, NICO, but you signed the deal, and it's not really like you've outperformed the deal. We basically paid and invested all that money for this year right here upcoming. You haven't earned more than your deal. You haven't outworked your deal. And that's where they stood heading into like yesterday. And yesterday, the final day of spring practice before their spring game, which is on Saturday, NICO is a no-show at practice. A no-show at practice. Tennessee has the option at that point to either acquiesce to these demands, and in doing so, just come out and tell everybody else on their roster that if you are a very important piece, you can go ahead and try and strong arm Tennessee too, and they're probably going to cave. Or they tell him to walk and basically throw away all the investment that they've got in him. Now, word came out that he wanted $4 million. Is that true? Who knows? But that's the rumor. $4 4 million obviously would make him the highest paid quarterback in college football. He certainly doesn't deserve that, but these people tried to strong arm Tennessee. And Tennessee did exactly what Tennessee should have in this situation with an ungrateful, ridiculous ask from these folks and told them to kick rocks. Get out. We're done. We're moving on. Happy that Tennessee did that. Obviously, had they acquiesced, it would have reverberated through college football. We'd have seen it more and more. And sometimes you need things to get worse before they get better. It just might have been the catalyst if we started seeing that more and more that led to these guys becoming employees. That's not going to happen now. At any rate, NICO now on the open market. Tennessee humiliated, and they deserve it. They deserve it for how they handled this entire thing. Which leads us to Ohio State. Now we're heading into the spring game, and I'm recording this before the spring game at Ohio Stadium. And this could not have happened for a worse time for those of you who do not like drama. And I'm sure I'll update this later. But here's the thing. If Lincoln Kienholz and Julian Sayin do not look good today, the noise for NICO to Ohio State, which is already kind of creeping up kind of loud, is going to be really loud. And we could start right here. If Ryan Day entertains this for a second, it means there's a big problem. Do I think he will? Absolutely not. I'll explain why, but let's discuss. Number one, we know this kid wants a minimum of 3 times more money. He wants $3 million. Will Howard got $1 million. Will Howard won a national championship. Looking back now, would you have paid, if you were Ryan Day, $3 million to Will Howard if you knew that's what you were going to get? Absolutely. Ryan Day improved Will Howard a ton. NICO, considerably more physically gifted than Will Howard, a cannon for an arm, unique arm talent. Obviously, he's fast. He's not as experienced as Will was coming in, doesn't throw as many picks. I think he showed us all an extreme level of toughness in the playoffs, got his helmet cracked twice. He kept coming. He looked like a warrior. He looked like the only one on that team with that kind of dog in him to me. I was really impressed with him. But he wasn't great throwing the ball, and he wasn't great throwing the ball in the biggest games of the year. But if we're just talking about NICO as a talent, just raw ability, keeping in mind that the situation with this family is going to be over, right? The situation's done once they're paid. Dad's got no reason to intervene. You pay him for the year. He's only got one more year. They're going to the draft regardless. So if Ohio State brought him in, it would be a 1-year rental. But just as a quarterback talent, Ryan Day and Billy Fessler, they had Will Howard all of spring to get some of those lumps out. Will was bad in spring. How good could they make NICO with the Ohio State offense and weapons from the end of the spring portal to the season? You're not working with as much time. You're missing out on the whole spring. Is NICO more talented in 2025 than Julian Sayin? He's got a year starting experience. He came in as or more talented, depending on what you think. He's older. He's bigger. In a full year of playing experience, leading his team to the playoffs with a bigger arm, and he's faster. In my opinion, there's no doubt that in 2025, NICO more talented than Julian Sayin. Maybe after a year of experience from Julian, I would say different. And I'm a believer in Julian, though I'm starting to have a little more second thoughts on my initial stance on him. But yes, I personally think just from a talent perspective, that would be a talent upgrade. But talent's only one part of the equation. There's a lot of people saying this guy's a cancer. Let's go over that. NICO has never had an issue at Tennessee as far as him with his teammates. The issue here led by the dad. However, if you let your dad dictate you sitting out of practice, well, now you're the issue. This dad came out and called Pete Nakos, who reported that there were negotiations between Tennessee and NICO, a bitch, and said he was lying, which obviously was a total lie. And his buddies jumped in to defend him. I'm certain that they're not going to issue an apology for that. And that just kind of shows character right there. Tennessee fans also jumped to the defense after the dad said that of Nico, and that there was no negotiations. And clearly it was happening. And definitely they won't apologize. And to me, this is scumbaggery at its finest, not just to strong arm Tennessee, but to then call people out who are reporting on it fake news, call them a bitch. Like, dude, these aren't folks you want to deal with. Get the hell out of here, man. You don't want to deal with these people. But sitting out and abandoning your team, man, come on, dude. You can't have a guy like that in the Ohio State locker room, can you? Now, you could say if he's coming to Ohio State only for 1 year, they already get that money, then there's no issue because dad won't be involved. And you could also say that Ohio State doesn't bring in guys who are just chasing a bag in the transfer portal. None of the transfers Ohio State has brought in. Let's go through them. Caleb Downs, Ohio State was second in his recruitment. It was obvious that when he entered the portal, Ohio State was on the board. Quinshon Judkins, he sought out Ohio State. Seth McLaughlin, perfect marriage. Will Howard wanted to go to a place where he could get developed for the NFL and potentially win a national championship. Max Clare sought out Ohio State. Like, we can go on and on. My point is, I can't think of a single guy that Ohio State brought in the transfer portal that was just about, I'm chasing the biggest bag. Ohio State's going to give me that biggest bag because they need me. They need someone at this position. That's not the way Ohio State does things. They don't go out and get the guy looking for the biggest bag, no matter what they need. Now, that doesn't mean that Nico doesn't want to get developed and doesn't want to win a national championship, but it seems to me like the number one priority for Camp Nico is the biggest payday. That seems really, really clear. Does that fit in with Ohio State? Does that fit in with the culture that Ryan Day has spent his entire career building? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. However, some could argue once this kid's in the system and he sees how things are done, just like you can make a quarterback better physically, you can also teach culture. You can also get someone to buy in when everybody else is bought in. And peer pressure is a hell of a thing. And the dad's not going to be influencing day to day. He's not going to be there with them. He's already got his money. He's got what he wants. We've never heard anything about Nico being a bad teammate. But ultimately, does he feel like a Buckeye to you? Somebody who would allow their parent, whether it was his idea or not, allow their parent to manipulate them into sitting out of practice over more money. Like, there's just right and there's wrong to me. And when you pull a stunt like that, I don't know if that's something, if I'm the head coach of a football team, no matter how much I need, if I'm in Ryan Day's situation, like, I don't know if I can even entertain that idea with you. But ultimately, it'll be very, very interesting if our guys here don't have a great day. If Ryan Day considers this for a second, because I don't think he's going to consider this for a second, to be clear, not for a second, not for the money, because he's the guy that's got to be strategic about the budget here. There is a salary cap, and dealing with that father after he's already dealt with the McCords, who essentially did the same thing after the 23 season, coming in wanting more money after a lackluster season. I also think Ryan Day doesn't want to be a guy with the reputation of bringing in 1 year transfer quarterbacks. That's not been his reputation. I don't think he wants that on him. But ultimately, this dude doesn't feel like a Buckeye, obviously. And it's difficult to sit around and preach culture being the number one priority and ignore what this guy just did to his team. It's tough to ignore that. But if Ryan Day brought him in, I would totally trust that this would work out. In fact, I'd be very excited about it. If Ryan Day thought it was the right move, I'd be excited about it. But as it stands now, no, man, no. This guy doesn't feel like a Buckeye. But if Ryan Day feels like it's the right move, good for me. And if he did bring him in, it means, my gosh, Julian was not ready, right? Not even close. Also, if he did bring him in, I think it would also mean that in 2026, we're not going to see Tavian sitting behind Julian. Those two, because we were sitting as it stands. If Julian were to start in 25, he'd start in 26, which means Tavian St. Clair sits for 2 full years. But if you bring in Nico for 1 year in 2025, then you've got Tavian and Julian going head to head to start in 26. Julian doesn't have a year of starting up on him. Tavian probably beats him out, which means Tavian doesn't have to sit for 2 years. Interesting. A whole lot of little legs to this, but I just wanted to get this down before the spring game starts, which I was 45 minutes into my drive with my son Carmen this morning when I had some car issues and we had to double back home, and I am missing the game. So, sometimes things happen. I'm absolutely furious. I even bought good tickets because I wanted to sit close. This wasn't like I just wasted $20. It's like 160. So I'll be watching with you guys. Good news is we'll be able to come on and do the spring game. So the post game show. Anyway, appreciate you guys. Talk to you soon. JUCK and Bucks out.